Hi everyone, hope all of you are doing super well, and in this video I'll be giving you some information on the requirement traceability matrix. So without any delay, let's get into it. So what is the purpose of a requirements traceability matrix? So the requirements traceability generally identifies and documents the lineage of each requirement. And we will see how it documents the lineage of requirement. So when we say a lineage of each requirement, we want to understand and we want to document from where did a requirement originate, or what is the entire requirement, and what is the lineage of that requirement, and what are the scenarios, test cases that are linked to a requirement. So it's just the start from the source to the destination. We want to understand what is the life cycle of that requirement. So if you generally see software requirements traceability, a requirement would start off and usually originate from a business need. And that business need is converted to a business requirement, which we document as the business requirements. And then these business requirements generally they get converted to stakeholder requirements, and from stakeholder requirements we convert them to solution requirements, which is actually the software solution requirements, the functional, the non-functional requirements. So from these requirements, this functional and non-functional requirements, it would be linked to a design, it would be linked to a code. There is a code that's associated to it, and it's also there are tests that are associated to it. So all these are associated with a requirement, and this in general we call as the lineage of a requirement. So generally, if you see in the traceability of requirements, there are three types of traceabilities. One is forward traceability, the second one is backward, and the third one is bidirectional. So in forward traceability, we would want to track and trace the requirements in a forward manner, meaning from the requirements from where did they originate to the test cases. In backward, we would want to find out what test cases are linked to which type of requirements. And in bidirectional, it's both forward to backward and backward to forward, all in one view. So those are the three types of traceabilities. So now I would give you an example of how do you build this requirements traceability. And there, as we know, there are two approaches to projects. One is agile and the other is waterfall. So the first one is I'll show you an example for agile. So in agile we have, as usual, we have the business requirements, then we have the stakeholder or the owner who's actually associated to that requirement, and what is the software requirement that's associated to the need, and we have relationship with other requirements. So every requirement might be associated with another requirement. It could be a parent child relationship, it could be some dependency. So we need to capture that information, and it's good to capture that as well. And then you need to mention what type of design components are linked to a particular requirement, and you have the program. And I say program, it's code, so you can mention what code is associated to the requirement, what are the associated entities. Okay, so for a requirement for now I'm just giving you a gist of what are the headers, and I would get into the details. So the next one is data fields, tests and scenarios, test cases, and requirement status. Now let's take an example. So in Agile, we generally use epics and user stories, which is what we're going to put into here. So for example, you have this epic, which is as a order department, we need an order management portal that can capture orders and track order statuses so that we do not have to manually enter order details in Excel sheets. So this could consider this as an epic, and then you have who is given this requirement. So you can mention, for example, the person, the stakeholder's name. And every epic consists of user stories. So for example, you have a user story, I've given the reference of the user story number, and as an order manager I should be able to view the orders pending in the order management portal so that I do not have to access other details, order details, from Excel sheets. So that's one user story, and this user story does not have any relationship with any other user story, so it's fine to leave it blank. And if you see the design component associated with it is we have this orders list page in the portal. and the code associated to it is view orders program. We have associated entities. So what are the entities associated to this particular user story? So in this case, we are displaying orders. So it's basically the orders entity and customers entity. And what could be the fields that are associated for these entities, the attributes? We have the order ID, items, the customer, the order status, and order date. Examples that I've given here. And I've also mentioned the test cases over here, which is user lands on the order page, there's no available orders, or orders fail to load. What is the scenarios that we might encounter, and what are the test cases as well, and the status of the requirement. So there's another requirement as well here, which is to update the order status, which is another user story. Now, there's no point of updating an order status when you don't even view or not able to view the orders. So that's why I put it depends on this particular requirement. Now I think you get to see the relationship between requirements that we mentioned. And the design also the same way I've mentioned the design and the test cases, scenarios, etc. So this is how you can put down a requirements traceability matrix for Agile, where you generally use epics and user stories. And if you see, it's a bi-directional traceability matrix, because you can trace the right from the epic to the test cases, or you can even backtrack. So it's bi-directional. Now coming on to waterfall. Waterfall is the same. I'm using the same format and template. The only difference is that instead of epics and user stories, you're going to have the business requirement, which is represented with BR1, and instead of user stories, we're going to mention it as the functional or non-functional requirements. So one tip is user stories are from the user perspective, and when you deal with waterfall and the traditional approach, it's all from the system perspective. So if you see here, it's more of as an order manager, etc. But here you're mentioning that the system must be displaying the list of orders. So it's all from the system perspective, but the rest is just the same. And this is also bi-directional, where you'll be able to trace it forward to backward. And I prefer having these extra fields, which is the associated entities and data fields, because at some point, if I want to understand the impact of changing something, I would be able to easily trace where are the sections or areas the impacts would be. So that's what I like about adding these extra fields, but it's totally left up to you. So if you see, generally there are relationships in the RTM. One relationship, the first one is derive. So relationships between two requirements. It's used when a requirement is derived from another requirement. So for an example, we've seen over here. So updating an order status is generally derived from the main one, which is a list of orders. Okay, so it's more of a parent-child relationship. So generally RTMs have these type of relationships, which is deriving relationships. Another type of relationship is it depends, the dependencies. Okay, the relationships between two requirements. It's used when a requirement depends on another requirement. So the dependencies can be of two types. One is necessity and another one is effort. Sometimes a particular requirement is necessary in order for the second requirement to get implemented. At that time, there is a necessity over there. And another scenario is the effort. So sometimes, in order to implement one type of a requirement, you need another requirement to make the effort lesser. So these are more of an effort type of a dependency relationship. And the next type of relationship is satisfy. So it's a relationship between an implementation element and the requirement. So to give you a very simple example, so we have a requirement over here, that is the system must display the list of orders placed by the customers. And the implementation element over here is, let's say, a design component, which is the orders list page. So this is going to satisfy the need of being able to view and capture the order details. So this type of relationships are more of satisfying. Another example is probably like a login screen. Okay, that login screen will help satisfy the requirement of being able to only allow authorized users. So these are some examples on the satisfy relationship. And the last one is validate. So these type of relationships are between a requirement and a test case or any other element that will determine whether the solution fulfills the requirement. So how now by now you would be knowing what section actually represents this relationship. And of course, it's the requirement and the test cases. So when all test cases pass, then you can validate and see whether the requirement fully is, as per the business need. So these are some types of relationships that the RTM generally consists of, and business analysts need to keep this in mind when building these RTMs. So, on a final note, what is the advantage of using these traceability matrices? So, one is it's faster and simpler impact analysis. So, as I said, whenever you want to make any change to a section or to a particular element, you would be able to easily track where are the impact areas, what all needs to be, changed in order to implement this recommendation or the change that you're bringing about. The next one is it's more reliable discovery of inconsistencies and gaps in requirements. So when you're able to see everything in one glance, you'll be able to easily discover if there's something missing or if there are any inconsistencies in the requirements. The third one is deeper insights into the scope and complexity of a change. Again, this is more on the lines of impact analysis. So, when you want to bring about a change, you would do an impact analysis to see the scope, whether it's within the scope or it's going out of scope, and if at all it's within scope, what's going to be the complexity and of that change being brought about. And the fourth one is its reliable assessment of which requirements have been addressed and which have not. So you would be able to see over here, like what I showed. You would be able to track statuses. So you would be easily be able to see which are the requirements that are already completed and which are not. Again, very easy to track. And the last one is it supports both requirements allocation and release planning by providing a direct line of sight from requirements to express need. So you can easily plan out your releases. For example, you have your requirements over here, and you might want to take up certain requirements because you feel that it's a need, it's a priority, or it's dependent on certain other requirements that are coming up in the future. This is going to help you even allocate and also plan your releases. So I hope you got some information on RTMs and tracing of requirements. So if you found this helpful, please do give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to this channel and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.